Hello Ironman, this is John Lloyd and it's good to be with you today. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about the differences and definitions between each of the Ironman's event names. This is a training to clarify that and just to continue to teach you on the purpose behind each one. One of the biggest mistakes made in Christianity throughout the world is that everything we do in a Christian church resembles Sunday morning. So Sunday morning someone speaks, we all listen, we all get up, we pray, and we go home. And then Sunday school, someone mainly speaks, we nibble on some food, we listen, we pray, we go home. Small group, someone speaks, we eat some food, we listen, we pray, we go home. Sunday school class, staff meetings, staff retreats, basically the same thing. In Ironman's Ministries, we have purpose behind each of the events that we do. And so quickly, I'm going to walk through each of the event names, and then I'm going to define the purpose as a training mechanism for you to become more familiar with the DNA for Ironman's Ministries. The first one that I'm going to mention is the Big Man's Breakfast. The Big Man's Breakfast is an event that happens usually in May. It's for all of the Ironman churches around the country to come. It's a massive event. It is very much geared toward unsaved men coming and having a great time. So they're walking in, they're seeing race cars and rock walls and huge exhibits. And it's, for a lot of them, their first experience with Christianity, with Christian men, and understanding how fun it can be to be a Christian. The Big Man's Breakfast is wrapped behind a gospel message, usually of a famous speaker. And we're looking to save as many men as possible at, again, the Big Man's Breakfast. There's also training involved in that day, but it's an event that all of the Ironman's churches get behind and take part in. After that, we have the Goatees Retreat. The Goatees Retreat is the annual Ironman's Retreat. Goatees stands for Guys Outdoor Adventure, Teaching, Eating, Encouraging, and Succeeding. Now, whether you remember that or not isn't really important. The key thing to remember is that the retreat always happens the last weekend in June. If somebody wants to know when the retreat is, don't try to think of the date. It'll only become a stumbling block or a reason for your friend not to come. You just have to remember the last weekend in June. Now, primarily, this is a growth retreat. 2.5 days, we build a village up in the mountains. It's for all of the Ironman's churches, although within a year there will probably be regional retreats. But there's very much growth involved. We end up having a lot of men get saved. And if you remember anything about the Goatees Retreat or the Ironman's Retreat, it's the most powerful event that we have by far, so don't miss it. The next thing that I want to mention is Wish on Wednesdays. 4 weeks following the Goatees Retreat, we have 4 Wednesday night barbecues at different locations around the state and country. That's where now men go back to their churches or their regions, and there's 4 Wednesday night barbecues offered for them to go a lot deeper. So they've come down off the mountain from the retreat the last weekend in June, and the 4 Wednesdays in July, they come back, and a lot of them wear their shirts and their bandanas, and we go really deep into the Word, but we also go deep into connection, and then connecting the men back to their local church bodies. The next event is called an all men's gathering. This is a very important one. An all men's gathering is where now a local Ironman church, they throw their own Saturday morning free breakfast for guess who? For all their men. So in their program and on their video, it simply says all men's gathering. Now they're trying to attract everyone in their church, everyone in their surrounding community, and their leadership team in Ironman for that church is pulling off a Saturday morning breakfast. You can look on the website and you'll see the plan and the itinerary of how to do that. But it's very much an attraction event. There's a great message given. There's also a connection card given out for now the men in your church to get connected back to not only the church, but Ironman's ministries within your church. What's very powerful about an all men's gathering is that it's done in such a way that it doesn't resemble any other Saturday morning men's breakfast that you can imagine. The whole morning, from about 9 o'clock to 10:20, is very purpose driven. But what I want you to remember is that an all-men's gathering is when you, as a band of brothers, Iron Men's leadership team in your church, is carrying off a Saturday morning free breakfast strictly for your men and the surrounding community and all your brothers and dads and cousins that you can gather up. The next term or event is a Band of Brothers meeting. Now follow the differences. A Band of Brothers meeting is different than a Band of Brothers donut briefing. So let's start with the first one. A Band of Brothers meeting always happens before an all-men's gathering. When was the all-men's gathering? It was Saturday morning around 9 a.m. for all the men in your church. Now Band of Brothers, which is the leadership team in your church, meets before the all-men's gathering at 7:15. And so we simply call that a Band of Brothers meeting. Guys will often ask, are we going to have one before the all-men's gathering? The way the DNA is designed is we always have a Band of Brothers meeting right before an all-men's gathering. Now in this meeting at 7:15, it's just for the leadership team or new recruits or guys that are potentially going to be on your leadership team to come and plan, to walk through what they're going to do in the all-men's gathering an hour later, to also strategize, and to hear vision for the coming year. So that's that's a Band of Brother meeting. Now the next term is a Band of Brothers, or we call it Bob. It's a Bob Donut briefing. Especially for church leaders, this one's really important. Every time you meet with your men's leadership, you can't have a 2-hour meeting or take up a Wednesday night or a Saturday night. So a Bob Donut briefing happens on a Sunday morning, either before or after or in between services. It's only 25 minutes long, and it's a place where the top leadership can briefly meet with Band of Brothers. You might have important announcements to give or certificates that you need signed or some vision that you need to share. That takes place for only 25 minutes on a Sunday sometime before or after services. That is the Bob Donut briefing. Finally, we have a Bob training. So keep in mind, there's a Bob meeting that always happens before the all-men's gatherings on Saturday morning. There's a Bob Donut briefing that happens for 25 minutes on a Sunday morning. And then there's a Bob training. A Bob training is where special forces or upper leadership in the whole organization is going around to churches and they're meeting with local Band of Brother teams and their pastors, and they're doing usually between 2 to 4 hour trainings. In some cases it can last 2 or 3 days depending on how far we've traveled. So keeping in mind that each of these things has a different meaning is very important. Iron Men, that's the big umbrella. Band of Brothers, that's what we call Bob. That's that first layer of leadership. And then we'll talk structure on another video to make that even more clear. Thanks, and I hope that makes a lot of sense as you try to understand further how the events work in Iron Men's Ministries.